Well, good evening. I didn't anticipate the hush of the crowd as we approach 6:30. So, wow, very respectful crowd here tonight. Thank you so much. Well, good evening. My name is Michael Kading. I have the pleasure and the honor of serving as the Park and Recreation Director here at the City of Neenah. I'm entering my 11th year with the city. I count them by summers and community fests. That's how I count them. So every year is marked by that annual event and the passing of each summer. So looking forward to a few more. So we do welcome you to the wonderful City of Neenah Public Library, where tonight we're going to take a journey through time, a journey that starts many years ago with the Doty family homestead, and it continues to the present day Doty Cabin Museum. Our past has shaped us and will continue to shape us and will continue to shape us well into the future. Over the last couple of years, we have said goodbye to two wonderful longtime docents. We were so blessed by their contributions to the cabin and our rich history here in Neenah. While at the same time, we had the opportunity to welcome in a new team of enthusiastic volunteers and docents. And I have to say, I've had to hang on to my hat because JC keeps me running and keeps me tuned in at all times. So I appreciate that. Thank you, JC. This year, our country celebrates its 250th anniversary with the theme of We the People. And so shall we celebrate We the People who have shaped and molded our community. We thank all those who have come before us, who have continued to support the Doty Cabin, and we welcome any new supporters who would like to help us out and be part of this history that's made here at Doty Cabin. Tonight would not be possible without the support of the Strange family, the Neenah Historical Society, the City of Neenah, and most importantly, you, our residents of the community. I have to say before we dive into this presentation, we have a few housekeeping items. One, if you got one of those gizmos, you don't want to be that person. So make sure that thing's on. I better make sure it's on silent. And it isn't! It wasn't! Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm glad I checked, because normally I'm pretty good about that. If you haven't visited the restrooms and you need to do so, you're just going to head outside these doors. I kind of just say hook to the left and you'll find your way to the restrooms. To set the stage for tonight's presentation, we're going to look at the 100 acres of the James Doty purchased in 1835. You're going to find that area in that big red circle there. Basically, if you set yourself at Theta Family Health Care Center or the hospital, and you make yourself to the north on East Forest Avenue, you head to the lake and you use the river, you've got that area marked out. So that's our area of focus tonight. Note that the total land was owned by Mr. Doty, would have stretched. We already talked about that. So here we are. You'll hear us use the term Doty Cabin, the Cabin, Doty Cabin Museum, the Grand Loggery, and you're saying to yourself, which one is it? All of the above. So as we go through time, when we're referring to the Grand Loggery, it's going to be the time that the Doty family owned the land and owned the cabin. When we're referring to the Doty Cabin, see, I just did it there. I didn't even mean to. But the Grand Loggery is that time that predates us and gives it to Doty himself, James Doty. The Doty Cabin is referenced in time after the cabin was sold to the John Roberts. And finally, when we refer to the Doty Cabin Museum, that's today. And we're so excited for today. Note that the Grand Loggery location is approximately 500 feet from its current location. You're going to note that on the map here with the two X's. In Doty's era, Namath Street, up and down, you'll see the black circle, ran north and south down the entire width of the island and actually ended at the Grand Loggery's front door. Lastly, and somewhat very importantly, not somewhat, but very importantly, tonight's history is one that reflects the perspective of early European settlers. The land was first home to the Native American peoples, whose history and presence is deeply important. Although tonight's presentation does not fully explore the Native American perspective, we want to respectfully acknowledge that perspective. Some original sources include language that was commonly used at the time, but would not be considered respectful, nor should be used today. We want to reference those original sources and share them only as a historical context. Finally, on to the real presentation, because you don't need to hear from me anymore. I would like to introduce our guest speakers tonight, Tom and Jim VanLieshout, and I practiced that, so here we are. Give these young men a round of applause. We have our lead Doty Cabin Museum docent, J.C. Park. We have our fine young ladies over there in an empty chair. Abby VanLieshout is going to be one of our ghosts. Becky Kay, I chose not to go there. You wanted me to. But Becky Kay is going to be another one of our ghosts. And I get to join the ghost table, so that's going to be really, really cool. It's really part of the story tonight to tell the history from our folks, our historians' real words, from the folks that made the history. On to our last slide, and I'm getting out of your way. If you see this signal or this logo on the screen, that alerts you to the fact that there's going to be something that you can go to the Doty Cabin this summer, Doty Cabin Museum, and find that, touch it, feel it, look at it, and really partake in history. So with that in mind, when you see this logo, make sure you think about coming out and visiting us this summer. We're open Memorial Day to Labor Day, 12 to 4, and we've got a ton of special events throughout the summer. We would love to have you join us at the cabin. Without further ado, it's on to you guys.
I'm up. Works for me. Tom's going to tell us exactly what to do, where to go, when to work this thing. So. And I'm shorter, so. So thank you for coming tonight. We're excited to tell you our story. Slide. See, told you. There. We'll present the history of the Doty Cabin in chronological order, so beginning to end, or until today, by its owner, the primary use of the property. Calling it a cabin is actually pretty misleading. You see, it was built as Governor Doty's retirement home, so it's actually his house. Reflecting beauty in its simple design, it was an 1,880 square foot residence with 2 stories and 7 rooms. So people, when they walk in the door, they think it's 1 floor, and then they realize there's actually a full 2nd floor. The lower floor consists of 2 rooms of equal size with a kitchen and a parlor, and a 12-foot entrance hallway, and a lean-to back wing used as his library. Above the main wing, accommodating several overnight guests, are 3 bedrooms. There were originally 2 stairwells, one from the entrance leading up to the sleeping rooms, and then the second one was from the guest rooms down to the kitchen. So one of the staircases is no longer there. Sarah Doty had a reputation for being a perfect homemaker, enjoying a happy, lively, and comfortable family life. In her 1927 poem, Memories of Doty Island, Memories of the Grand Loggery, the daughter, Mary, shared fond recollections from her youth. And it's really long, so I'm choosing to do 3 little stanzas, if you can bear with my poor poetry reading. Is that okay? Okay, so this is from the daughter. Slide, sorry. Slide. There you go. One winter's night, when stars were bright, I gave myself away, or let the priest, for really, the words I scarce could say. My parents' gaze was eloquent, and when we 2 were wed, they spoke to him besides me. Be kind to her, they said. I will, replied my husband, and the vow he gave them then was kept by him most faithfully. He was the Prince of Men. So that was written by the daughter. That's it.
Thank you, JC. The history of Doty Cabin is deeply woven into the fabric of our lives. The cabin welcomed countless individuals who went on to shape our cities and leave an enduring mark on our modern world. In Doty's time, the homestead was called the Grand Loggery. This evening, we'll present the story of the Grand Loggery with a focus on the transition from Doty's retirement home to a resort, and finally, to the museum that we enjoy today. Throughout the presentation, we'll discuss several personalities who utilize the property and their impact on our world today. You'll also witness how important it was to our ancestors to preserve this historical building. I forgot my slide myself. Tonight, We'll start with an introduction of James Doty and how he became aware of the island that bears his name today. Our story begins with the War of 1812. On August 16, 1812, American General Hull surrendered Fort Detroit and his army to the British. Throughout the war, Britain retained control over the Northwest Territory, spanning from Ohio to Wisconsin. The Northwest Territory again became part of the United States with the Treaty of Ghent. At that time, Wisconsin was part of the Michigan Territory and governed under the authority of Territorial Governor Lewis Cass. In 1820, Cass led an expedition to explore the little-known Upper Great Lakes region, modern-day Wisconsin and Minnesota. The objective was to map out a terrain and locate the source of the Mississippi River. The following passage from Memories of Doty Island details a portion of that expedition.
In 1820, Governor Cass organized an expedition to explore the lands between Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, and the Mississippi River. He selected an exceptional young man of 21 who was serving on Michigan Supreme Court to be the secretary and leader. That young man's name was James Duane Doty, born in 1799 near the Hudson River in New York. 4 large canoes and 14 men, some of them Chippewa Indians, comprised the crew. The expedition started in May at Detroit and ended 4 months later in Green Bay. In July, James Doty and his crew had discovered a 400-acre island between 2 branches of the Fox River. As he swung his canoe out of Lake Winnebago into the Fox River, Doty was held in awe by the island he encountered. It was beautiful, teeming with wildlife and vegetation. His diary includes his profound desire to own that big island and one day make his home on it.
Who was James Doty? First and foremost, he was one of the founding fathers of Neenah and Menasha. He studied law and became a law clerk for both the Supreme Court and the Legislative Council of the Michigan Territory. In 1822, at age 23, he was appointed federal judge in a newly created territory by President James Monroe. This territory will later become the Territory of Wisconsin and part of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. In 1830, at the request of the federal government, Doty surveyed and laid out the military road system throughout our state. This system became the foundation of several of Wisconsin's current highways. Elected to the House of Representatives for Wisconsin's 3rd District in 1839, he became Wisconsin's 2nd territorial governor 10 years later, selecting Madison as its capital. James Doty was a successful land speculator, as he owned land throughout the state. In Fond du Lac County, he built a home on a land that later will become the site of Tuchita Correctional Institution. In Madison, Doty donated land for the building of our state capitol. As a judge, Doty was well respected by the Menominee Nation. To show their appreciation for all his legal work, they gifted him an island. Remarkably, that was the same island Doty had seen 13 years earlier on the expedition. In 1831, when the land was approved for sale by the federal government, Doty purchased a portion of the land, approximately 100 acres, for $6 an acre. Officially, it was sold as land speculation and not for settlement. On August 31st, 1843, the land became legal for settlement through the Federal Land Office. After retiring as territorial governor in 1844, Doty and his wife Sarah moved from Madison to Neenah. The years they spent at the Loggery were surprisingly brief. The Dotys spent their winters in Milwaukee, traveled significantly, and upon the request of President Abraham Lincoln, Doty came out of retirement for a position in the Utah Territory. Leaving the state in 1861, James Doty spent his remaining years in Utah. The next section, JC and Jim will explore the time period when Doty's built and then owned the Grand Loggery.
Fulfilling his dream, the Dotys started building their retirement home, completing it in 1845. The exterior was built of hand-planed native oak, and the interior was polished walnut and mahogany. Entering the loggery, the rustic hallway contained animal skins, Native American blankets, and over the main door hung a pair of deer antlers with canoe paddles crossed above it, or below it. Beyond the hallway were soft draperies, gleaming mirrors, shining silver, and elegant furniture which conveyed to the visitors a comfortable living, generous hospitality, and good companionship. Sarah filled the dining area with silver condiment set, pitchers, and flatware, all designated for equality in her new home. Several articles of furniture, such as the dining room chairs, the governor's writing desk, and her sewing chair, were delivered by boat up the Fox River from their home in Green Bay to Neenah. The piano, which is pictured here, came from New York. Their Davenport, from New England, was brought up the Mississippi to the Wisconsin and Fox Rivers, of which you can see at the cabin. They're all there for you. A great field stone fireplace originally ornamented the entrance hall. When the evening mist rose over Lake Winnebago, bringing a chill to the air, the families and friends would gather around the fireside for an evening of song and story. Governor Doty was actually very well known for singing, and so was his wife. They were very musically inclined. So they would sing quaint old hymns. They had ballads. The ones that most commonly known are like Bonnie Doon and Last Rose of Summer. So they were very musically inclined. Sarah, uncomfortable with the layout at first, was thrived once she had turned it into a real home. And like I had mentioned, the daughter Mary gotten married to John Fitzgerald. They were actually married in the parlor of Doty Cabin. Outside the cabin, I did slide.
Nope, sorry.
So proud. I know. Outside, Sarah planted her favorite flowers. Low sweet briar under the shiny windows and sweet william, pink roses, and heartsease besides the lattice doorway. Pictured here were the ladies of the Y House and Garden Club. They received special thank you in 1981. They had researched and planted the flowers that Sarah had loved so much back in the day. However, because of the orientation, we'll talk about how the cabin was moved, the orientation of the house had changed. So those plants that did really well in the sun are now 100% in the shade. So not so good anymore. James cultivated a variety of shrubs, cereals, and fruit trees, holding a special love for his apple orchard, which we'll talk about later. Doty raised fine horses and farm animals. His hobbies included pheasant hunting, making wine from his grapes, and curing his own ham. On their property, James was constantly building other outbuildings, so smaller buildings like lean-tos, sheds, stables. There were so many it resembled like a miniature log village. Sarah affectionately named their homestead the Grand Loggery, since it was the largest building on their property. Governor Doty was very proud of his apple orchard. We talked about that a little bit. It was populated with some special seeds. So while he was in Washington as a congressman, Doty had a lot of friends and contacts, as you can imagine. One of the more significant ones was Daniel Webster. If you're not familiar with Daniel Webster, he was a known congressman. He's also known for the Webster's Dictionary. So he's from New Hampshire. In 1903, Neenah Times ran an interesting story about the origin of some of the Grand Loggery's apple trees.
In back of the old homestead is the stump of an apple tree, which grew from seeds planted by ex-Governor Doty and given to him by Daniel Webster in the year that the Grand Loggery was constructed. When Mr. Doty was appointed territorial governor of Wisconsin by President Fillmore and was about to leave Washington, Daniel Webster bade him goodbye and presented him with a large red apple. Doty split the apple in two. He ate one half and Webster the other. The seeds of Doty's half were brought to this city and planted.
So devoted to his apple orchard, he stood in the way of progress for the island, as a promising college campus in the Twin Cities was never realized. The founders of Lawrence University favored the island for the site of their new university. Governor Doty blocked the idea of them coming to the island because he feared that the college students would steal the apples from the orchard. Now we'll explore one of the ways the Dotys used the Grand Loggery for the benefit of the community. In the early 1850s, James Doty and Harrison Reed were focused on building the communities of Neenah and Menasha. Looking for entrepreneurs and business builders, Governor Doty offered the use of the loggery. This allowed possible prospects a chance to stay and evaluate the area. Once in Washington at a state dinner hosted by President Millard Fillmore, Congressman Doty sat next to a very wealthy captain in the British Royal Navy, Captain L.B. McKinnon. Anybody familiar with that name? I know you are, Jeff. The captain's trip across America was a topic of their conversation throughout the evening. McKinnon, who was an avid hunter and traveler, was interested in investing in the expanding American West. Doty made an enticing offer to the cabin. Here is Doty's confirming letter to the captain.
I have some land, the soil of which is composed of rich black loam. It is situated on the banks of the river Neenah, close to the outlet of Winnebago Lake, where steamboats pass daily. 2 villages are within a mile. Neenah on the one hand, Menasha on the other. A good market is at hand for agricultural produce, particularly culinary vegetables, also pigs and poultry. The soil is rich limestone, capable of producing any crops in great perfection. It is part of an island of 850 acres. Several flour mills and sawmills, besides other kinds of machinery moved by water, are in the vicinity. Schools and well-established religious societies are in each of the villages. A country is settling rapidly, and respectable female helps are in great demand. I am now erecting several houses with parlor, kitchen, and bedroom below, and 2 chambers above, with a brick chimney and oven in the kitchen. Each of these houses will be surrounded by a secure fence to enclose 5 acres of cleared island. I will let these lots to tenants whose characters are satisfactory for 1 or 5 years as they prefer, taking as rent 1/2 of the produce of the land. I will likewise give the accepted tenant a range for a cow and a pig on the adjoining land, and as much wood as they can use for fuel.
The captain documented his 2-year trip throughout the United States in the book Atlantic and Transatlantic Sketches. Several chapters included in the travels through Wisconsin, providing a first-person perspective of life of the island in 1852. On his way through Wisconsin, the captain took Doty up on his offer. Captain McKinnon stayed at the loggery for 6 weeks. He found game in abundance for hunting, bear, beaver, deer, squirrel, probably bear, and fowl. Let us listen to Captain McKinnon's experience on Doty Island and the surrounding area we now call High Cliff State Park.
At the outlet of Lake Winnebago is an island containing 800 acres, the favorite haunt for ages of the Menominee Indians, and in truth, they are capital judges of locations. I was fortunate enough to receive an invitation to this favorite spot, and by the great kindness and assistance of my host, the Governor of Wisconsin, the Honorable James Duane Doty, I was enabled not only to enjoy the finest sport, but likewise to investigate the best means of securing first-rate shooting for any adventurous English spirit that may despise the narrow and very expensive limits of the sea-girt isles. For 6 weeks, I amused myself, exploring in all directions, and the more I roamed through the beautiful country, the more I was delighted with it. Sometimes I climbed a range of limestone hills and traversed deserted Indian clearings. At others, I rambled through boundless flowery meadows
impressed with this area, upon his retirement in 1854, he purchased a large plot of land on the island. Doty's successful use of the Grand Loggery laid the groundwork for Menasha's early growth and continues to benefit us today. So Captain McKinnon is the person that cut through the dense the timber that divided the two cities. You guys are familiar with this in a second here. Originally it was called McKinnon Avenue, which later became the Avenue, which we now know as Nicolay Boulevard. He donated the land of the Irish for the building of a Catholic church. St. Patrick's Menasha continues serving the parishioners today. And St. Thomas Congregation in Menasha also has roots in Captain McKinnon. McKinnon also built several projects for the growing city, such as Plank Road in Menasha, you guys are familiar with, which gets you to Appleton, and a crib bridge at the north channel of the Fox River. The captain, Governor Doty, his son Charles Doty, mapped out the village at the east end of the island. Now Jim's going to explain a few other ways that the Dotys use their homes.
A Menominee village surrounded the area when the Dotys built the Grand Loggery. This majestic tree stood in full view of Doty's home. We know it as Neenah's council tree. The tree held a significant role and a profound spiritual meaning to the Menominee Nation. Traditional powwows and councils were held around the tree and surrounding area. As the Dotys began to build the retirement home, the Menominee were comfortable with their new neighbors. Many knew Governor Doty from his law work representing them throughout the years. The Dotys developed a close relationship with the native people. Many of them were valued friends, with the Dotys providing them with gifts. Sarah and James wanted their home to be a welcoming place for guests. Tribal imagery filled the entrance hall, which also served as a showcase for gifts such as native blankets, baskets, and warrior's shirt featuring a wampum. Some of the Menominee wanted to understand Doty's culture, so the loggery was opened to teacher Frances Adeline Finch. Already teaching natives in Stockbridge, she began crossing the Lake Winnebago between the two cities with 6 Menominee guides in birch bark canoes. During his career as judge, Doty fought for Native American rights. In 1861, he was appointed the superintendent of the Indian Affairs for the Utah Territory. Doty supported Wisconsin's efforts to honor the Native American heritage by naming the cities and streets of indigenous origins. Locally, he personally named Neenah, Menasha, Taco Street, and Name It Street. Name It, running straight into the Grand Loggery entryway, has its roots in a Native American word called welcome. In the Grand Loggery, Doty oversaw the legal needs of the natives throughout northern Wisconsin. He relied heavily on several traders and in the area as interpreters. One of the traders that assisted Governor Doty was Thomas Jourdain, a blacksmith, postmaster, and marshal in Menasha. Thomas, whose mother was an Ojibwe woman, was well respected by the various tribes, and he was thoroughly conversant in the language and customs of the Oneida, the Ho-Chunk, and the Menominee tribes. The Native Americans looked upon Governor Doty as a great wise chief, listening to his counsel and seeking his help when needed. Pictured here is an 1851 recommendation letter for a Green Bay Oneida chief to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, stating, "I have known this man for 20 years. I do not know of a better man in the country in which he lives." Doty was radical in his time concerning his view on how the law should treat Native Americans. In an 1827 case against Ho-Chunk Chief Redbird, Doty protested to Congress on how Redbird should be charged. Congress disagreed with Doty, though the judge, through his quiet advocacy with President John Quincy Adams, he pardoned Redbird. And the Redbird is a statue that's in downtown Menasha. One of the strongest bonds James Doty had with the Menominee Indians was with Chief Oshkosh. Over the years, Doty developed Chief Oshkosh, helped him navigate and guide this nation through continual changing of laws and treaties that faced them. As a trial judge, Doty presided over the 1831 murder charge against Chief Oshkosh. The trial was so significant in Wisconsin law, this mural of the trial and 3 others are on the wall in Wisconsin's Supreme Court. The murals represent 4 main sources of Wisconsin's law: Roman civil law in the appeal of Caesar Augusta, English common law in the Magna Carta, federal law in the U.S. Constitution, and Wisconsin's territorial law in the Chief Oshkosh trial. In the mural, Chief Oshkosh and Judge Doty face each other, with Native Americans, voyagers, and trappers in the audience. Charged with the death of another Indian, the chief would have been innocent under tribal law. But the United States government charged him under American law. A jury found him guilty. Doty overrode the jury's guilty verdict and entered a judgment of acquittal, pointing out that the killing was justified under Indian customs. In his ruling, Doty stated,
United States laws do not apply to Native Americans under these circumstances because, at the time, Native Americans were not granted the privileges of citizenship under the law. So United States law did not apply to their internal disputes and affairs on their own lands. Knowing as we do that American laws were not enacted for the Indian, it would be tyrannical and unjust to declare Chief Oshkosh a malicious offender against rules which the same laws presumed he could not have previously known.
the decision was unpopular and ultimately cost him his job. In 1832, Judge Doty was replaced with another judge. With the Dotys often out of town, they used the Loggery as a warm, welcoming way station to the growing number of settlers coming to the area. Many needed a place to stay for an extended period of time in order to get established. Our communities were expanding quickly as the United States Land Office helped build plank roads between cities and Military Road, which is now Highway 41. At the same time, Doty was subdividing his land in 5-acre parcels to build homes for the settlers to rent. One traveler new in the area was Reverend O.P. Clinton. Clinton, a traveling preacher, was known as the minister to the pioneers. In 1846, he moved from Milwaukee area to a block home near Riverside Park. He brought his Puritan faith to Menasha, having the first service in the Knights Tavern located currently downtown, in the current downtown. Reverend Clinton performed Neenah's first church service in the log home. The service consisted of a group of 12 individuals, including the city's founders, Harrison Reed and Governor Doty. Doty and Clinton quickly developed a strong relationship. Governor Doty offered the Clintons use of the loggeries rent-free. Starting in autumn of 1847, the Clintons stayed for 2 years, leaving to a 10-acre plot near the current Smith Park, benefiting from a gift from the Doty family. While the Reverend was out preaching, Caroline turned their new home into a hotel, hospital, post office, school, and a church. Again, the generous use of the loggery helped shape the Twin Cities. Opie Clinton had a profound influence on the growing communities. That impact continues in our lives today. Clinton's legacy lives on in many congregations that he established in the 1850s. He had a hand in the development of the Congregationalists, the Presbyterians, and the Methodist churches in the Fox River Valley. The First Congregational Church of Neenah and Menasha is one of the several local churches that have origins in what Reverend Clinton started. He built the first school on Doty Island, which eventually became Nicollet School. When Clinton School was torn down in 1894, the brick and wood was used for the foundation of the house at 508 Nicollet Boulevard. In Menasha, you can also find Clinton Center Park. For early Western settlers, there was no special homes for pregnant women, like the maternity wards that we have today. In close-knit frontier communities, neighbors often depended on one another for survival and support. A neighbor with a larger or better equipped cabin might offer space to a woman needing a safe place to give birth. The homeless and the distressed took refuge under Sarah's motherly care. Sarah invited expectant mothers and their families to spend a few weeks at the Grand Loggery until the baby was old enough to be moved. For years, the cabin's curators often heard, "My mother, my grandfather were born in Doty Cabin." We found several stories we would like to share with you. In 1848, Martha Finch, born in the Loggery, was the first white girl born in the Twin Cities. These portraits are of Martha and her husband, Danford. Soon after she was born, her parents moved to 814 2nd Street in Menasha. Martha would live in that home for over 99 years. Mrs. Christina Ditzler, born in 1848, lived at the Loggery for 2 years as her mother was employed by Doty. Later in life, Christina toured Doty Cabin and told the curator she was born in the upper south room. The Charles Shoemaker family had a farm in town of Inland and traveled to Doty Cabin when medical attention was needed. In December of 1847, pregnant and with a harsh winter predicted, Mrs. Shoemaker wintered at the Grand Loggery. On January 2nd, Mary was born. She was a studious child, living her entire 89 years in Neenah. Honored for her outstanding spelling ability, 11-year-old Mary was awarded a book pictured here, signed by her teacher, Miss E.L. Welch. The Childhood of Mary Lisa was presented to Mary in 1859. 7 decades after her birth, Mrs. Mary Schumacher Gleason revisited the Grand Loggery where her story began. Finally, in 1849, Alice Ernestine was born in the Grand Loggery. We will learn about Alice and her family in the next section.
Hugh and Ophelia Ernstine lived in Oshkosh and were friends of the Dotys. In 1849, when Ophelia became pregnant with Alice, Sarah invited them to stay at the Loggery until mother and child were well enough to go back home. The two families remained friends through the years. In 1865, when James Doty, the current governor of the Territory of Utah, passed away, Sarah moved back to Oshkosh and lived with her daughter Mary. Sarah sold the property to the Erstings and remained in Oshkosh until her death in 1871. The Grand Loggery became the residential home of the Erstings. A gentle hush settled over the Loggery. Hugh cherished the quiet, tranquil refuge the surrounding area provided. In 1874, Alice married George Pearson in the Grand Loggery, becoming the only individual to be born and married in the cabin. Alice and George moved out of town but returned to Neenah, living on Columbia Avenue. Later, in the same year as Alice's happy wedding, sadness filled the family as Ophelia passed away. With both wife and daughter gone, Hugh felt like a stranger in his own home. He needed to find a buyer for the loggery to begin a fresh start elsewhere. In 1877, he found a buyer with the perfect, long-sought site for his lifelong dream. That man's name was John Roberts. JC and Jim will now focus on the John Roberts era of the Grand Loggery.
Okay, so we're going to talk about John Roberts. Some of you know the history. Born in New York, John Roberts was an avid outdoorsman and experienced hotel keeper. He managed hotels in New York and Ohio. In 1866, he moved to Columbus, Wisconsin, and became the proprietor of the Whitney House, which still is in existence today. Finding a better opportunity, John moved to Menasha in 1870, where he was an alderman and he served 2 terms on the Board of Supervisors. Professionally, John moved to Menasha to become the proprietor of the new downtown National Hotel, for those from Menasha. The hotel was soon met with a lot of praise, primarily from John's focus on customer service. He brought a great image that reached the national audience. A newspaper editor best summed it up the importance of having Mr. Roberts in Menasha. Since the name of John Roberts and the National Hotel have become familiarized to the traveling public, the business of the hotel has gradually increased. It can boast a patronage unequaled by any other hotel on the route of the Northwestern Railroad. John always dreamed of building and owning his own facility, specifically on the waterway for outdoorsmen like himself. When Ernsting's property became available, the Doty Cabin property, he put his plans into motion. About 1875, he began working with Hugh, keeping much of his plans secret and confidential. John hired an architect, well-known, William Waters, to design the resort. Open on May 30th, 1877, the resort was built in a Gothic Southern hotel style. As noted in Memories of Doty Island, the hotel was a 43 by 68 foot wooden structure with 35 rooms, with a veranda across the front and a balcony above. An office, parlor, dining room, and several bedrooms on the main floor. The second floor consisted of more bedrooms and suites. There were hot and cold baths and modern sanitary arrangements were provided. So the resort was built literally right next to Doty Cabin, which was one of the major attractions of the complex. I mean, you got the resort and you have Doty Cabin, so those were on the main circle driveway. The first floor of the cabin was used as like a smoking room, entertainment, playing cards, billiards, exquisitely decorated in antique fashion. It was very cozy on a gloomy day. On those cool spring and fall mornings, vacationers would warm up next to the fire. The second floor bedrooms were used for lodging for the resort's hired help. So you can see it here. Doty Cabin became an integral part of the Roberts Resort. I mean, you can't get much closer, right? So when we refer to like Roberts Resort, we're actually referring to the resort as well as the cabin. So it's part of the whole thing. In 1903, the Oshkosh Northwestern described the Roberts Resort this way.
The grounds about the resort are the most beautiful, and for the past 30 years have been carefully guarded by their owner, Mrs. M.E. Roberts. Much care and taste was exercised in planting the trees, and now the many varieties are in their prime. Among the trees are the birch, the maple, hickory, larch, oak, elm, acacia, and many other varieties. The grounds west of the hotel have been planted and will be sold to those who desire to build summer homes. The platted lots describe the segment of the circle conforming to the short line of the lake. All of the lots permit of a magnificent view across the lake to the cliffs of the east shore.
So as you can imagine, the business did very well in attracting customers. Business was so strong that they added on 3 guest cottages in 1881 in Swiss style. In 1885, additional buildings were built, as well as the additional comfort of gas lighting was installed in the hotel. The resort offered guests a wealth of outstanding experiences. Roberts Resorts included the finest grass tennis court. So it new in America, because this was a sensation spreading across like Europe. So imagine playing a picturesque game of lawn tennis underneath like all the trees and the maple trees and elm trees. Fishing on the lake was exceptional also, with abundant enormous walleye, pike, black bass, and rock bass. So every night, of course, every Saturday they had a party. So they had a fancy dress ball every Saturday in the large dining area. So everybody turned out in their fanciest dresses and suits. The pagoda, which is still there today, is at the end of the walk, where many rich and famous, as well as regular folks, could stand and be shaded from the hot sun. Okay, through the years, Mr. Roberts sold off pieces of the land that were not useful for the resort. So it was really big, it started to shrink. In 1885, C.B. Clark, which you guys would know as one of the founders of Kimberly-Clark, was looking to develop a portion of the river with the purpose of creating housing for the city's expanding population. Clark began conversations with John Roberts about the western shoreline, which was a poor quality, was marshy, full of marsh, cattails. Clark had the idea or the plan that he's going to have the frontage drained and used to form solid land. He was going to convert it to a residential property to that equal to like Wisconsin Avenue, so the big houses, and Riverside Park. So he was going to do that on the south side. On November 1st, he purchased 10 acres of the shoreline. The significance of this purchase isn't fully realized for another 40 years or 4 decades. We'll discuss that next time I come up. Jim's going to discuss the various guests that vacation at Roberts Resort.
Roberts Resort consistently had high occupancy, season after season. Guests came from all over the country, many Southerners leaving the hot sun in the summer to get a taste of the outdoors.
I didn't break it.
An old register was used in the early days of the hotel. It contained the autographs of many who came to Lake Winnebago to fish. Among the names of Civil War generals, William T. Sherman, Philip Sherman, Anson Steiger, President Grover Cleveland, Kellogg's founder William Kellogg, and railroad magnate Jay Gould, and others. Earlier we mentioned additional cabins were added. They could be rented out or owned outright. George Pullman, the inventor of the luxury Pullman sleeper rail car, owned his own cabin there, as did the Honorable Philip Smith, the Outagamie judge, who went on to become the vice president of the Chicago and St. Paul Railroad. Local businessmen like Kimberly Clark's C.B. Clark and Menasha's John Strange utilized the resort for personal and business purposes. One notable long-term resident guest was Myron Reed from Indiana. He was invited to be the candidate for the governor by the working men of Indiana. But Myron declined the offer, saying, "I'd rather fish at the Roberts Resort than be the governor of Indiana." Most of the guests, however, were ordinary men and their families, like Mr. Underwood from Milwaukee, who in August 1903 caught 70 black bass, or George Eldridge family from Chicago, who went fishing for 2 hours in 1897 and caught 65 large black bass. The resort was a favorite spot for large conventions. In the summer of 1887, the 21st Wisconsin Infantry Regiment held their annual reunion on the resort campgrounds. At noon, 280 soldiers, many Civil War veterans, marched from downtown Menasha down toward Neenah Street to the resort encampment. Local business helped support the community, and the Wisconsin Central Railway was no different. For several years, they published a little book in spring describing the scenery along the line and the various places of interest. That included Roberts Resort, which enabled the whole country to see the wonderful vacation spot here in Wisconsin. In July of 1895, the unexpected happened. The energetic 62-year-old Roberts was found at the bottom of the resort's cellar stairs with a broken neck. Speculation was a heart attack may have caused his fall. With the deep shock of John's sudden death, Martha was placed in the care of professional nurses for several weeks. Martha and the children pulled together and continued to run the resort. Before we leave the Roberts portion of our presentation, I want to bring you to the attention of some of the interesting facts about Neenah's historic council tree. Not only it is important to the Native Americans and Neenah and the state of Wisconsin as well. It is one of Wisconsin's top 8 historic elm trees. So significant, this photo currently hangs in the Wisconsin Historical Society in Madison.
And in the Neenah Club.
And in the Neenah Club. The Doty Cabin has a picture on display. When you visit the cabin, pay close attention to the highlighted area. You can see Roberts Resort, the Doty Cabin, and several of the individual cabins. In 1885, the council tree and land around it were condemned for removal by the Federal Corps of Engineers. Before the historic tree was destroyed, sentimental Neenah residents with an appreciation of history preserved much of the tree's wood. Many kept the raw wood as keepsakes, others made unique gifts, still others were honored by government officials. You have the ability to see parts of this in the historic tree throughout both cities. John Strange sawed many of the remains for the lumberman Henry Sherry's family, who owned the land before it was condemned. Tom will now finalize the Roberts ownership portion.
In 1902, it became obvious to Martha that the family could not continue their stewardship of the resort, so she decided to sell. Over the next several years, a half dozen names would own the property. The first owner was a partnership from Chicago. They planned on renovating interiors of both facilities and changed the name to Pleasant View Hotel. A year later, the partnership sold to Herman Bernard for $35,000. In December, he deposed of the property to Dr. Jack Judson. The doctor took charge of the extensive improvement projects. By season's end, the Pleasant View Hotel hosted almost 200 guests. In 1904, Dr. Judson kicked off the new year with a renovated Doty Cabin. One room was turned into an historical room, and the rest turned into rentals. Guests were thrilled to have the honor of sleeping in Doty rooms. On rainy days, the Doty Library was used for games and entertainment. Even with that activity, the resort's reservations were disappointing. The next year, starting off with the name change back to Roberts Resort, as Dr. Judson felt the name was hindering his efforts. The summer attendance continued to drop. The resort's 1906 opening was delayed. By the end of the season, their mortgage went into foreclosure. December, Mrs. Roberts bid $11,300 for the property. Her offer was accepted, and she once again became owner of Roberts Resort. The new year started with Martha advertising for summer bookings. Suddenly in April, she sold the property to developer W.J. Hay. In June, newspapers noted that there were no guests at the resort. Mr. Hay's intention was to tear down both buildings and subdivide the land. The community and city fathers were in an uproar, each wanting to preserve Doty Cabin. The councils on both cities were looking for all possible options. Neenah's option was to buy the cabin and move it to Riverside Park. Menasha, concerned with the damage of moving, countered with both cities combined to buy the property and the building and leave it where it is. The Neenah Times ran an editorial from a Neenah citizen, and a few years later, the editor, and then a few days later, the editor added his own ideas. Their views were widely held throughout the community. Let us listen to both of their opinions, and you can just feel their passion.
It seems a pity that the old log house on the island, built by the late Governor Doty, should be allowed to be torn down and destroyed. In speaking of this matter yesterday, a leading Neenah businessman suggested that the city secure this historic landmark, place it in Riverside Park, and preserve it as a relic of the time when this location was a wilderness, and when the dwellers were the wild Indian tribes. This old log cabin is now the only relic of early days in Neenah, really worth preserving, and it seems to the times that it should be saved from the destruction.
Since the article appeared, this editor has given the subject more thought and realized more of its importance and its desires to add a few words. In furthering interest in the above brief but patriotic suggestion, the ancient landmarks in Wisconsin are becoming things of the past. These days, it is all commercialism and no sentimentalism. Our legislative bodies do not ask as to the value of these historic relics, but only what will it cost. Now, how about the old homestead?
Menasha businessman John Strange, owner of John Strange Paper, had an idea on handling the situation. Early in the summer, John and Mr. Hayes quietly reached an agreement in principle. The Stranges had permission to use the property pending finalization of the details. In the interim, the resort was renovated by the Stranges into their private residence. In the summer of 1907, John Strange Paper hosted a major paper-making conference at the resort. The rest of the summer, the family used it for a summer vacation spot. In 1909, a land exchange finalized their 2-year agreement. The Stranges transferred their Oshkosh property to the Hayes, and the Hayes transferred Roberts Resort and Doty Cabin to Mrs. Strange. The Stranges offered the use of Doty Cabin to friends and several organizations. Wisconsin Governor Davidson cherished his stay in the former governor's historic home. Several Boy Scout troops took advantage of a weekend of camping, hiking, and personal growth. 12 scouts from Menasha's St. Patrick's Parish were the first of 4 troops to enjoy a great weekend of laughter, friendship, and a lifetime of memories. John, a successful business owner, was also a politician. In 1907, he was elected the 21st Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin. In 1914, he ran for Wisconsin's Senate seat, strategically using Doty Cabin in a campaign ad. During their tenure, of owning the properties, the Smiths paid little attention to the upkeep of Doty Cabin. The neglect of the cabin with broken floorboards became a playground for neighborhood kids. As we conclude the ownership of the Strange family, JC will discuss the next chapter in the cabin's journey.
Okay, remember we talked about that C.B. Clark wanted to turn the shoreline of Doty Park into a bunch of residents that look like Wisconsin Ave? We're back to that. Okay, good. C.B. Clark's plans never materialized. In 1922, after C.B. and his wife both passed away, C.B. Clark Jr. and other heirs decided to donate 5 acres of land to the city with the stipulation that it be used for park purposes only. The group of individuals added to the generous gift with another 4 1/4 acres. So now you're up to 9 1/4 acres of riverfront shoreline. Still a swampy cattail marsh, the city decided to develop it into a public park, but you needed a lot of reclaimed soil to get it to be non-marshy. The fill was arranged to create waterways and bridges and added to enhance the beauty. In 1925, the Stranges made a contribution of their own to the city. They donated Doty Cabin, with the stipulation that it be moved to the new park. The new park, called Doty Park, is the same one that we enjoy today. Thanks to donations from the Stranges, the Clarks, and several individuals, we and generations to come can enjoy this peaceful setting. Now the city had to turn its efforts to the generous gift of a significant historical artifact. With years of disregard and constant battering from the winds off the lake, it was falling apart and needed a lot of work to be moved. The fireplace that was there was unable to be moved, and so was beyond repair, so they had to leave it behind. Neenah's Park Board led the project with the aim to return the property to its original condition. Despite the years, traces of the Doty's presence still lingered. Some of their personal effects and furniture were still in the cabin. These furnishings were sufficient, but it's not really enough to call it a museum for public viewing. A group of community volunteers assisted in collecting local artifacts. It planned to assemble as many as they could of historical interest as possible, particularly like the 1840s to the 1860s. The worry was, were they going to be able to assemble enough of the artifacts to make it an actual worthwhile museum? So what happened over the next few months really surprised them. Doty family descendants came out of the woodwork and donated James and Sarah's artifacts, including personal stuff and legal papers and their personal Davenport. The estate of Nellie Fitzgerald, who was the granddaughter of Governor Doty, her belongings were in a bank in downtown Neenah, bank vault, holding Doty's tableware. They got a hold of the current owners of the trust and they donated those tablewares to the cabin, which we have today. R.H. Weiss from Billings, Montana donated Doty's 3 chairs and a settee. They're made of horsehair. The community also had an overwhelming response. There are so many items in the cabin that are from the community. Family artifacts from their ancestors, and so those are willing to be seen and shared in public. An Appleton man offered a rifle that was once used by the governor. It was a flintlock type and very priceless in historical value. The community's vision of historical items was coming back to the new museum in a tremendous amount. So right now we have almost 2,700 items, to kind of give you an idea. In 1928, following the completion of the new park and the Doty Cabin, the city celebrated the official inauguration with a 2-day grand opening. Entertainment was provided for both evenings. Touring the park and the cabin was free to the public, and it still is. Under a brilliant August sky, attendees were free to wander and explore the picturesque beauty of the new Doty Park. In the park pavilion on the first night was Prunella, an English drama performed by the Winnebago Players. The second evening's entertainment was a band concert performed by Appleton's 121st Field Artillery. The tour featured the debut of the electric lighting in the cabin. And this is the only picture we have of the electric lighting that used to be in the cabin. So you can see it. The Neenah chapter of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, otherwise known as the DAR for simplicity's sake, were the first curators of Doty Cabin. The cabin was open to the public on many weekends in the summer. In September 1931, the chapter presented the tablet, the stone tablet, to the City of Neenah, marking the exact site. So, just to clarify, they took this tablet and put it where the cabin used to be, on Mary Mrs. Strange's front lawn. Okay. Over 100 people attended to witness the presentation. Eventually that stone became over, just so you know, but originally it was placed at the original Doty Cabin location. The high school bands opened the ceremony with speeches from former Governor Walter Kohler, the president of Lawrence, Dr. Riston, with personal family and remembrances from a relative of Governor Doty. Dr. Riston stressed the necessity of understanding the past to know your present. The tablet, unveiled by society members Susan Kimberly and Mary Stewart, was accepted by S.F. Shattuck, the president of the Neenah Park Board. 5 years later, the tablet was moved from the Strange property front lawn to its present location in front of the Doty Cabin. With the committee's mission a complete success, the next step was encouraging everyone in the Neenah and Menasha area to take the time to fully appreciate the new historic marvel. Over the next 20 years, the public did come out, not only from Neenah and Menasha, but throughout the state of Wisconsin, throughout the U.S., and actually around the world. Arthur Neville, the Brown County Historical Society president, often traveled to Doty Cabin. On a side note, the Green Bay's Neville Museum is named after him. To give you some numbers, you ready? 1933, 2,500 people came to the cabin. In 1938, so 5 years later, that number increased to 3,234, with 24 states and 4 foreign countries. So we were definitely the place to be. In 1944, it was increased all the way up to 4,000 people a year. And we weren't even open every day. It was weekends. So 4,000 people. So despite the good news of the attendance increase, there were definitely some signs of safety-related problems. The problems were so serious, they again called on the City of Neenah and the community to intervene. Jim's going to take us through the details of the intervention.
All right, let's take this home now. By 1948, it was evident that time was taking its toll on the structure. The rafters were rotting through, the structures deteriorating with dry rot, and to the point where the whole building had to be rebuilt. In addition, the foundation was also giving away. The cabin was closed to the public. New logs, rafters, roof, and flooring were needed to make it sturdier and to last into the future. The estimate to rebuild the cabin was quoted at just under $13,000. The Neenah Common Council allocated funds for the reconstruction of the historical site, and the community pulled together to raise an additional $5,000 to help defray the costs. Photographic records of the structure were taken to provide precise blueprints of its reconstruction. We wanted it to be exactly what it was like. The contractor, De Kaiser and Rasmussen, had 80 days to raise and rebuild Doty Cabin. Restoration work was projected to coincide with Neenah's celebration with Wisconsin's centennial. The city purchased 94 logs and were placed in the park for seasoning process. These logs were used for walls and structure in T-shaped sections, serving the support structure of the new building. A new concrete floor was laid for the replica following the demolition of the original structure. To honor the building's history, existing beams, logs, and wood were in good condition and were reused. With a new cedar shingle roof, usable original doors and windows were placed in the rebuilt structure. Douglas fir timbers were used on the end of each wing rather than split logs. The closet and stairway in the back of the wing were eliminated to make one large room. The front stairway was built as original. Once the project was completed, the relics and furnishings stored in Doty Park were replaced. The reconstruction was finalized in early September, exceeding the initial schedule by a few weeks. There's been a lot of mystery around the fireplaces. This will help clear up some confusion about its history. James and Sarah had a great fieldstone fireplace and a decorative hearth. John Roberts updated it to fit the needs of his resort. He expanded the existing structure, making it with a squared and dressed fieldstone laid in cement mortar. The fireplace was so bad in 1926 it could not be moved to the park. The city rebuilt it to scale at the new location. Under the 1948 contract, it had to remain in the existing location and not dismantled during the building's raising. Pictured on the right is the fireplace on the new structure's foundation. Therefore, the fireplace that you see today is built to the scale replica from the Roberts Resort era and similar to the one used by the Dotys. Concerning fireplaces, Grand Loggery actually had 3 of them. The main one we see today was in the south room. There were additional ones in the east and west wings to supplement the heat that was needed from the main fireplace. In the 1948 rebuild, slight constraints and cost played a role in the decision not to add them into the design. The dedication of Doty's Cabin rebuild was held on Sunday afternoon, September 5th. The public was encouraged to attend. Chairman of the Neenah Park and Recreation Commission, Dr. J.M. Donovan, presented and rebuilt the rebuilt cabin to the city and the area. On behalf of the City of Neenah, Mayor Kalfas accepted the reconstructed historical museum. The mayor said that the cabin was an inspiration for the future in the continuing remembrance of the past. It became a recurring message resonating throughout the afternoon's speeches. Using the backdrop of the state of Wisconsin's centennial celebration, Governor Renenbaum voiced the need for the continued spirit of the pioneering Americans and exemplified in the building of this historic landmark. Donovan publicly acknowledged the gift of the cabin from the Strange family as it helped make Neenah's history a living and vital thing. After the ceremony, over 300 toured the old Grand Loggery. Over the decades, the spirit resonated throughout the years. It started soon after that September afternoon. The 300 people that toured and reassembled Doty home the day that was just a start. 2 weeks after the dedication, 111 visitors from Milwaukee toured the museum. The school buses from the Milwaukee Public Museum's educational tour was a surprise to the cabin's curator, Harvey Lehman. In 1973, the Grand Loggery Doty Cabin was listed in the State Registry of Historical Places. In 1986, the City of Neenah's Landmark Commission designated the Doty Cabin as the city's first property on Neenah's Register of Historical Places. For 70 summers, the public continued to learn, be entertained, and remember the past. Through the years, various ways to inform them, they were very eager to learn. The continuous staff of devoted curators developed programs and exhibits to learn the history that was made very exciting. They also cultivated a warm and inviting atmosphere from the grounds to the interior spaces, so visitors felt instantly at home in the cabin. Listed here are the curators through the years, some pictured in action. We owe them a debt of gratitude for their years of dedicated service to the cabin, to the City of Neenah, and to you, the public. Thank you, curators. If you ask any of the curators, nothing matched the energy and eagerness of the children they worked with, making it a very special time. The children were so absorbed in their school field trip, they asked questions all day long. Every fall, local schools planned field trips to Doty Cabin for the 3rd and 4th grade classes to explore the 175-year history of the City of Neenah. On the left, Harvey was explaining historical tools for molding candles to the 4th graders. Upper center, 2 students checked out the many 19th century artifacts. The curators will tell you stories of many adults touring the cabin, reminiscing of the time they toured as a child. Oh, the memories. Sometimes the curators wore specific, period-specific costumes that served to immerse the audience in the historical setting of the Doty Cabin. Lower center, Jan is rekindling memories of yesteryear by creating a warm scene in the Doty kitchen. Other times, period actors bolster the message with live demonstrations in the exhibit. Left is a picture of a weaving and spinning class demonstrated by a member of the Fox Cities Artisans. Group tours are always encouraged, as visiting historical societies travel to the cabin and make it a day of exploring the valley's history. Upper left, the ladies of the Neenah and Menasha Federated Women's Club on their tour, examining an antique bed warmer on the 2nd floor display. Upper right, the descendants of the early settlers gathered for a reunion, recalling the heritage left by their ancestors. Individual family tours are always welcome, a perfect way to immerse yourself into the past and understand the world of the 1850s. Today, we reach out to a new generation and to the world with new technologies. There is so much to see in the Doty Cabin Museum. Take the time to explore. Several of the items mentioned today are there as a traveling exhibit. Many more and more for you to see in future editions in the museum. We will leave this section with the words of a 10-year-old. She wrote this after her school trip in 1968. Over 50 years later, that same girl, Julie Gommel, found the essay in a scrapbook and wrote this on Facebook. I love that place more than it expresses.
Friday, our class and the 5th graders went to Doty Cabin. We made a lot of noise on the bus. My mother came along to help. She took lots of pictures of Doty Cabin. First of all, when we got there, a man told us about the Doty Cabin. And then we went inside. We saw 2 pianos. We also saw real old books. And saw the old room. We also saw old arrowheads, and it was real nice. Jolie Gomo.
So this concludes our presentation, which is good, right? I want to thank everybody for coming, and spending some time with us with this nice weather going on.
Last slide.
What's that?
Slide.
Slide, see? Slide.
There.
Yes. So I do have some takeaways for you, but I do have a few thank yous I want to get out there. I got a couple of volunteers here tonight I want to recognize. Ben and Haley are the high school students back here doing some movie clips for us. Nick Jevney, from the president of the Menasha Historical Society, is here doing some videoing for us. And Miranda, the new executive director of the Neenah Historical Society, is here as well. They're helping us out with handing out the flyers and stuff. Our presenters, I do want to thank Tom VanLieshout. His brother, if you didn't know it, is his brother Jim. And Nick, I have one for you as well. Okay, so looking forward, because I know you want to get out of here, but I do want to tell you, we do have a lot of new programs coming. I have these back there on the table by my husband, and he'll van it for you, show you where they are. So a lot of new programs. We're going to try some new things this year, have some programs inside the cabin. We do have embroidery classes, picture frames, poetry discussion, and Anne will be leading the poetry discussion, so she is here today. And we are partnering with the Neenah Historical Society to do the Time Travelers Camp this year, as well as the police department. Miranda, you want to tell them about this one?
I'd love to.
God. I don't mind sharing the limelight. Go ahead.
I definitely won't take credit from this. This was a lot of Juicy's idea. We are doing a museum passport this summer, Memorial Day to Labor Day, where you have the option to attend and get stamps for visiting up to 6 partnering museums. So we have the Bergstrom Mahler Museum of Glass. If you've been there, clap for it. The Bridge Tower Museum, the Doty Cabin Museum, the Hiram Smith Octagon House, Neenah Historical Society, the Menasha Historical Society, and the R. Harder Gallery of Gems at Jewelers Mutual.
That one you guys will have to check out. Totally worth it.
So if you enter for a prize, you have to have obtained at least 4 stamps from the museums to be entered for a grand prize drawing on September 10th. You'll turn these in at the Parks and Rec office.
And every time you go to one of those, you get a stamp, but you also get a sticker. Free stuff. So on your way out, if you like, I've got some pictures up there. I do have some Doty artifacts, including stuff from Mrs. Doty, Mr. Doty.
Get a spoon.
I don't have a spoon. But go ahead and check it out. But if you have any questions, come on up and talk to me. Mike's over there, Becky's over there, Neenah Historical's here, Menasha Historical's here. We're all here. Have a good night.